fabulous manner. Post lunch, I think it's better if one sings a song rather than makes a speech. But don't worry, I'm not going to sing. I'm a horrible singer. I have been given 12 to 15 minutes, and I have this template presentation which I use to tell people about what is happening in India, the entire movement, the issues, the repression, and the kind of perseverance which the Indian movement has displayed in recent years, particularly after Fukushima. I use this presentation to show you some pictures, but basically with you I'll be discussing about some more recent developments and our upcoming plans and what probably we could do jointly, and the manners in which we could probably collaborate at HUL. So very briefly, India is among the very few countries which have a very ambitious nuclear expansion plan even after Fukushima. So as we are speaking here today, the government of India has a plan to unleash horror on the people of India by setting up at least 20 more reactors in the coming 20 years. As of today, the total capacity of nuclear energy in India is less than 3% of the total electricity. But the government has a massive expansion plan. And it is important here to briefly note that this expansion plan is actually not a result of some coherent thinking of energy policy. It's more of a diplomatic pressure that has led India to accept all these imported reactors and to plan for this massive expansion. Very briefly, when India conducted nuclear tests in 1974, its first nuclear tests, it used the technology that it got from Canada, US, UK and other countries, Russia, in the name of peaceful use of nuclear energy. But it conducted nuclear tests in 1974 using that technology. So it cheated the international community. And after 74, there was a ban on India which lasted for more than 35 years. So no country supplied India any further nuclear technology. It is interesting that India conducted yet another nuclear test in 1998. But there's a difference. When India conducted nuclear tests in 1974, there was a global ban against India, right? But when India conducted nuclear tests in 1998, there was a gradual adoption of India on the nuclear club. And that's very interesting because by 1998, India had opened its markets. So all these Western corporations have bigger stake in India. The then President of the United States, George W. Bush, thought India is a very important country in his entire game of Asia vis-a-vis China. And it also fits in his design of war against terror and so on. So pure international strategic reasons led the United States to welcome India in the nuclear club after the 1998 tests. And hence it's very important to understand that actually to get legitimacy for its nuclear weapons, that India has agreed to import massive number of reactors from US, but not only US, also France, Russia, Canada, and every other country. It is buying uranium from Kazakhstan, Nigeria, it is buying uranium from Australia. So actually to get legitimate status for its nuclear weapons, India did a bargain. So it's going to buy large number of uranium, it's going to buy large number of reactors of all other countries. And hence, and the whole justification that India requires it for its people, because people need electricity, etc., is a post facto concoction to justify this bargain. Because before this bargain, there was no process of estimating how much energy do we need and how much of it should come from nuclear energy and what kind of reactors India should import, if at all India has to import, and so on. So the expansion that is happening today is not a result of any coherent thinking on energy, It's a result of the bargain which India did to get legitimacy for its nuclear weapons. And it's also very interesting that these new imports will further promote India's nuclear weapons. For instance, India will use all the uranium that it will import for its civilian reactors, and the domestic reserve of uranium will now be free to be used totally for weapons purposes. And this is happening at a time when we have escalating arms race in South Asia, at a time when we have Hindu fundamentalists in India and we have Muslim fundamentalists in Pakistan. So in India, the whole nuclear story is inextricably linked also to the nuclear weapons question, and that's very, very important. And that is why the Indian government, because it has already done this bargain, is unleashing horrible repression on the people who are protesting nuclear reactors. So, so these are the places where new power plants are being proposed. A large number of reactors. India is buying 6 reactors from France and installing it near Mumbai at Jaitapur, and these will be EPR reactors. This is going to be the world's biggest nuclear power park. 10,000 megawatts, 6 reactors of 1650 megawatt each. India is also buying 4 reactors from General Electrical for Kovara on the western coast, and 4 reactors from Westinghouse on the eastern coast. It's going to buy a large number of reactors from Russia as well. It's going to buy, of course, large amount of uranium from Australia and so many other countries. So I have already spoken about the bargains that happened. The movement at the grassroots against these nuclear power plants are really massive. Tens of thousands of people, fishermen, farmers, women, children are coming out openly and protesting at places which I just mentioned. And these protests have immediately, the concern is one of livelihood, because it's going to affect a large number of farmers. They will be evicted from their villages. So a large number of villages will be dislocated because of these new nuclear power plants. Similar fate awaits the fisher folk. Their fishes will die. So the most immediate trigger for these massive struggles on the ground is one of livelihood. Then of course the safety question comes. Then the whole question of total non-transparency, total unaccountability in which the nuclear industry in India operates. The government of India is itself the operator. It has a government company called Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited, which operates all the reactors. So if any accident happens, the liability goes to the government. So I think it's also important in this context to understand that the global nuclear lobby, the global nuclear industry is looking for countries like India and other Asian countries, precisely because here we have governments which are ready to subsidize nuclear power plants. Nuclear industry, as we know, is no longer competitive in the open markets of the West, and hence they are looking for Eastern countries. And if you look at the reports of the global nuclear lobby, they will always say that there is a new renaissance happening in Asia. So in Asia, they are looking that the governments will subsidize these nuclear reactors heavily, that the governments will take care of liability in case of an accident, and the whole system in the Asian countries is so non-transparent that they can get away with whatever they do, meaning mishandling, meaning the unsafe practices, and so on and so forth. So I'll show some pictures of the protests. These protests have been really massive, but entirely peaceful. That is something amazing about this protest. These protests would have women from villages, the fisher folk who have come out in tens of thousands. So we have Jaitapur, Chutka, Gorakhpur, Nishiverdi, Kovara, Mahi Baswara, Kudankulam. These are some of the places where these protests are happening. And these protests have met. The government response has been very, very brutal, repressive. In Kudankulam, several thousand people were put in jail for several weeks. Some people were in jail for more than 3 months. And ridiculously high number of police cases, totally fictitious police cases, have been leveled against thoroughly peaceful protesters. So in Kudankulam, you have people who have more than 350 cases, police cases against them. And these cases are pretty serious. In India, the British government used the sedition law to harass and to victimize the people like Mahatma Gandhi and other freedom fighters. The same sedition law is being used by the Indian government against anti-nuclear protesters. So in Kudankulam, you have more than 8,000 people who are facing charges of sedition. So they have been declared anti-national. One entire village practically on the southernmost end of India has been declared anti-national. Recently, when the new government, we have a new government right now, very right-wing Hindu fundamentalist has become Prime Minister now. And this government, one of the first thing that it did, it came up with an intelligence report saying these people, the anti-nuclear protesters, but also people who are fighting big industries and mining and so on, these are threatening national security. And they said that they named 50, 60 people. My name also appears in that list. And they said these 50 people are causing 2 to 3% damage to the Indian economy. I don't know from where do they reach this conclusion, this whole calculation. So we have the best economists in the Intelligence Bureau. So this is the situation there. Very precisely, the movements are strong, but they are stuck because the government repression is very strong and it's increasingly getting harsher. So even after 3 years in the struggle in Kudankulam, people are facing charges of sedition, war against the Indian state, damaging public property and so on. But these movements, as I said, have been very peaceful. There has been no damage, there has been no violence at all. The biggest Kudankulam leader, S.P. Uday Kumar, was also supposed to be here with me in the NANF 2014, but his passport is seized by the government, so he is not able to come. So I think in India we have a lot of potential. We have a battle line which is drawn, and it has to do with lives of people, lives of millions of people. Very briefly, the movements are strong at the grassroots where the reactors are coming up, but increasingly also in the urban centers, because urban activists at least see it as a question of democracy, see it as a question of transparency, even if they are not anti-nuclear per se, but a lot of people are increasingly seeing it as a question of democracy. So I would say that India is a textbook case of how the nuclear industry in 21st century after Fukushima is trying to turn back the wheel and trying to use a repressive government to expand its business. So I think in India we have question of livelihood, we have question of safety, security, development, we have question of democracy. All these questions are so pronounced, so in your face when you see the anti-nuclear movements in India. So I'm glad that I'm here with you, and I think we must work on strategies, as I said, because in our countries in Asia, the nuclear industry is particularly interested, as our governments are repressive, non-transparent, undemocratic. So it's a bigger challenge for us, which we have to fight together. One thing which I would propose today is we would be more than happy to host the next No Nuke Asia Forum. So I formally extend my welcome on behalf of the CNDP and the anti-nuclear movement in India, that we are more than ready to host the next No Nuke Asia Forum. All of you are most welcome. So I would request the organizers later, but here I want to make a public request. Thank you so much.
Thank you.